Guys, welcome to the First Responder Podcast. I'm joined with one of the people I've probably known the longest in Wagner, Travis Mitchell, former Marine Corps. I say that, once a Marine, always a Marine. But, I've known you since I was little, and, you've always stayed in touch, and I appreciate that fact. But we're here today to talk about some stuff that affects military people when they are in the military, when they get out, stuff like that. So kind of tell us how you ended up in the Marine Corps.
So when I was younger, my cousin Michael, I can always remember him coming back from Marine Corps boot camp, and just like as a young boy, you see this guy and he's just buff, and he's picking me and my cousin up on his arms, and he's wearing his Marine Corps uniform, and I think that kind of started the fire there. And then once I got a little older, there was a guy that lived down the road from me, and he was a aviation mechanic. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like I never realized that, oh, Marines, man, they can do aviation stuff, and a lot of people think, oh, Marine Corps, they're just ground pound and go get it, But when I seen that, so that kind of transitioned into that. And then I got into high school, and obviously I wasn't the best probably student that has came through Wagner Public Schools. I think I use that to my advantage sometimes because it was just the way of life. And then I talked to a Marine Corps recruiter, and he's like, hey, you want to do this? Of course, 9/11 happened, and all us guys that time, we were just gun-ho to go fight for our country, especially coming from a town like Wagner, these areas, everybody wants to go protect their country. And I signed up in October of 2001. And then I went through the Pool E program. Once I graduated, I left July 7th, 2002.
So, you were, right after 9/11. So, there was not just people out of high school, but there was tons of people joining the military because they were ready to go, defend the country. And like, was it always in your mind Marine Corps or nothing, or did you ever consider any other branches? Or
I don't. There was a point in time that I went and spoke to the Marine Corps recruiter, and I was kind of like, man, maybe the easy way might be the Army. You know what I'm saying? Like, and no offense to those guys, but it's just that was that thought process, because at that time, Marines were a little. The Marine recruiters and the Marines that I was dealing with at that time, they had all been raised through the Marine Corps by Vietnam veterans. So they were super gun-ho, and they were all hard asses really when it comes down to it, because all those Vietnam veterans were kind of on the tail end of their careers. Well, I was getting, the gunnies and stuff that had ate that stuff up through those guys and they came in the Marine Corps in the 80s. Well, a lot of those Vietnam guys were all drill instructors and stuff during that time period.
where did you go to California for your boot camp, or?
Yeah. So first time I ever flew in an aircraft, first time I ever really was outside of Oklahoma, Arkansas area, flew to San Diego, California. And I remember landing, and we get to the airport, and you have to follow these signs. And of course, our recruiter told us all this, and we get down there, and there's one drill instructor there, but this is a guy that now, hindsight, I look back on it, he's on the tail end of his career. He's just, not saying taking it easy, but he's just, okay, going through the motions basically. Yep. So it's not real rowdy. We're in a public place anyways, and they get us on the bus. That's when shit hit the fan. Is like, okay, you're on our bus now. Eyes down. We couldn't. There's no way that at that time I could have told you how to get from the airport to MCRD San Diego, which is just right around the corner. Now that I see it, it's literally like 2 exits down, because later on I was stationed there, and I knew. It's so funny to think about it. You're like, golly, this whole time we had no clue how to get out of here or where to go, and here we are, like 2 exits down from the airport. So, and that going to San Diego was, you hear these airplanes, you're out there working out and doing your stuff, and you in misery, like trying to, like, oh man, this is the worst thing in my life. What am I doing? And these guys are just, and I'll be honest, a lot of the drill instructors at that time, they were super pissed off because a lot of those guys were grunts and they weren't able to go to Iraq. They had been in their whole time. This is what they wanted to do. And all their buddies, they're leaving to go to Iraq, and then they're not being able to. So we kind of got the brunt end of that situation.
So they didn't take it easy on you by any means.
No.
How long was it?
So 13 weeks, and Marine Corps boot camp is the longest boot camp. And a lot of people don't know this too, kind of a side note. But if you go to Marine Corps boot camp, if you transition, if say you do 4 years and you want to go to a different branch, you don't have to go to their boot camp. You just transition and go. But if you come from the Army, Navy, or anywhere like that, and you want to go to the Marine Corps, you still have to go through their boot camp. So we had some guys that had done that. In particular, I remember there was a guy that was in the Navy and he transitioned to be a Marine. So he'd already been in the Navy, 4 years. And then here he is going through Marine Corps boot camp with all us guys, And
Well, I mean, you got to think about it though. No disrespect to any other branch, but when you see a Marine in their dress uniforms, like it's just they stand out, and like it's kind of like being a state trooper in Oklahoma. Like when they show up on scene, like business is about to go down, and
yeah.
so like I understand that. I do. I mean, I get that. Like So what stood out to you most in boot camp? Like what was the toughest? Like what was your biggest adjustment from civilian to military life?
So probably the biggest adjustment was the full on like going 90 to nothing, and really physical training that time. I mean, because as a young kid, you're not really doing a lot of that stuff. So you go
Yeah.
and so really, I mean, I look back on it. I don't know that there was any hard parts because, I grew up with my stepdad was my dad and looking at it and he was pretty tough on me, so I didn't miss that type of stuff. That type of stuff was already there. I think a lot of the discipline that you get was built on that, and receiving that was probably a tough thing to go through. But as far as boot camp, at the time it seemed tough, but really it's just a mental breakdown of, okay, you had so many bad habits. Now let's break those. And they always used to say, hey, we're breaking the house down and we're starting over on the foundation. We're going to build you up to what we want you to be, which is a United States Marine.
Yep. So can you kind of talk about the Crucible? I mean, that's what you always hear about when you think Marine Corps boot camp. How was that for you?
So that was definitely a challenge. Of course, you come in there, you do what we call rifle week. So for guys that go to San Diego, we call it going up north. So we go from San Diego up to Pendleton. When we get to Pendleton, you do your grass week stuff. You do like all your medevac training, or not, I shouldn't say medevac training, but like your I'm trying to think, tourniquet
Like
training, that types of stuff, and then you
casualty
go,
care type stuff?
yeah, that type of stuff, and then you go and you do your rifle range, and then so during that period, it's crazy as how I think this was what makes the Crucible even worse is that during rifle week you're up at 4:15 in the morning, and yeah, we were down south, we were waking up at 5:15, 5:30, but that hour difference is huge, and so you're waking up at 4:15, you're going out, you're spending all day on the rifle range. I mean, raining, it didn't matter, whatever, you're there. And it's a lot, it's a very stressful environment. They want it to be stressful, so they make it very stressful. So you're already tired, you're already dealing with that, you're not getting back to the rack until probably 10:30 at night, and then you're turning right around and coming up, which that's a good amount of sleep, but then you don't think it is. You're looking at,
Hmm.
golly, man, I'm just so wore out, so tired. And then once you're done with that, then you kind of start the process into the Crucible, and that becomes super challenging because, I mean, there's no sleeping. We're up there. I never in my life thought that, we took wet white baths up there, and these drill instructors, of course, they're jacking with us and making us take all our clothes off. Here we are in the hills of Pendleton, and it's cold at night. It's like, golly, this is cold, and we're dealing with that. And then you have to have fire watch. You may only get like 30-45 minutes of sleep, and then then we do the hill, and we climb. I mean, when I say you can touch out and you can lean your arms out and you can touch the front of the ground, climb this thing, and it's just, but there's so much motive. This is when I really stopped, and when I look back on it, I really stopped and took a breath of seeing my drill instructors and the pride and stuff that they had as Marines was during this time of like, okay, you're about to accomplish something. So continue to do that throughout the Marine Corps. Continue to accomplish your goals. This is just a small goal that was in front of you. Continue to do that. And seeing those guys and dealing with that was just, I mean, incredible, you know. And then you do the Crucible, you come back and you have Warriors breakfast. And it's comical now because you don't eat hardly any. I mean, you're eating MREs all week. And then you go to the chow hall and they're like, oh, it's a free for all. Basically, the drill instructors, they go back, they do their thing. You know, those dudes are tired. They're getting sleep and doing all their stuff. And then they're like, you know, just eat, well, you know, Warriors breakfast. Your senior drill instructor stays with everybody. And of course, we all just got horribly sick.
Yep.
You know, because immediately after it's over with, all right, we're running back, you know, and you know, it's just a crazy deal. So, and then, you know, clean your rifle and do all that good stuff and then head back to San Diego. And at that point, you know, you have your Eagle Globe and, well, when I was going through, they didn't give the Eagle Globe and Anchor at the top. So it's kind of funny because they used to give the Eagle Globe and Anchor when you got to the top of the Crucible. Well, then they quit doing that for a little while during the 9/11 period. And now I think now, if I've read correctly, they give the Eagle Globe and Anchor again when you're at the top of the hill. So, you know, we had to wait.
And just for people that don't know, like that's when you know you're a Marine.
That's it. That's when you can call yourself a Marine, you know, and that's when, in theory, the way it is okay. You don't call your drill instructors, you know, drill instructor, sergeant, whatever. You call them, you know, sergeant, whatever, or staff sergeant, whatever. Now, you don't really do that, but unless company, you know, the company first sergeant or something's around, but it's just one of those things. So yeah, that's the pivotal moment of becoming a Marine right there. And I think I don't know, because I didn't get to experience, so I don't know that getting it on top of the Crucible makes it any more heartfelt, but it's still a little challenging because you got to go back down south, and then they transition you into that period of actually being a Marine. Okay, you know, we still wake up early, but it's not as much chaos. There's not, you know, you're doing things to prepare you to leave San Diego in a sense. You go down there and you do final drill. And of course, and for everyone that don't understand or know, but that also is very, you know, tradition in the Marine Corps is doing drill and things like that and being good at drill. So of course you want to be able to be the platoon that gets honor platoon with doing final drill good. And, you know, they base the honor platoons and stuff off of how many events that you won throughout the, you know, who won the rifle range, who won pogo sticks and all that stuff. So it's definitely.
Do you remember how many people you started with total?
So I think, if I remember correctly, I think we started with like 100 and maybe 112, something like that. And we ended up graduating with like 89 guys.
Wow.
You know, so and right in there, kind of to backtrack a little bit, I met one of probably, and this leads into the, you know, where the military takes you. I met one of probably my best friends, that a person that I can truly say, hey, this is my best friend, and his name's Paxton. And we still, I mean, he was my best man at my wedding, you know, and we just been together forever. And it was kind of cool how we transitioned into, we went to boot camp together, graduated boot camp together, and then we went to, you come back to go to, I can't even think of the MC, Marine Combat Training. And then, so just to track on that a little bit, MCT is for what they call the pogues. It's, you know, guys that are not going to do be grunts. So grunts go to infantry training, and then guys that are non-grunts, they go to just Marine Combat Training, which is just your standard learning how to deal with, you know, learning how to use a compass, basic rifle type stuff, you know, go on hikes and things like that. And so him and I went through that together, and then we got stationed together in North Carolina at our first, well, we went to school for 46s, CH-46s as mechanics. And then we we followed each other. We was in the same unit together, went to Iraq together. I mean, you know, so it was kind of cool to have that experience and deal with that.
So let me ask you this. So you do regular boot camp, then you do MCT, and then you still do your advanced training on top of that?
Yeah. So you go to boot camp, which that turns you into a basic rifleman, you know, is what they say, basic rifle Marine. Then you go to MCT, you kind of get that little bit of advanced stuff. Like I said, you learn how to use a compass, you know, and how to land navigation, basically. So they, and that's up at Camp Pendleton too. And they set up waypoints and things like that. And you've got to go to these waypoints and get check marks. And now taking mine, that was 25 years ago almost, I think. So, it may be completely different now, but that's how it was then. And I kind of got a funny story because I remember we got done with a hike at MCT. It was a 5-mile hike, and we had a 100-pound pack on or something like that. I mean, just grueling up through them hills and everything. We got back, and the instructors, the MCT instructors, they handed out oranges and apples. Dude, that was the best. It's so vivid in my memory that I still remember it today. Like, that was the best orange or apple I had. And I'm sure it was just something from the chow hall, that was nothing crazy, but it's just fun to think, like, man, it was just so great.
A 25-cent orange was the best thing you've ever had.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, and then MCT, and then you go to your MOS training. So like where we went to MCT for, I can't even remember. I can't remember the weeks on how many weeks it was, but went to MCT training. The grunts, their infantry training is like as long as what our MCT and our standard, MOS training is, and they learn all that they go and get more proficient on the bigger guns, the land navs, more serious type stuff, things like that. So yeah, I went to North Carolina, CH mechanic at that time, and
those are helicopters, right?
those are the double rotor helicopters, front and back double rotors.
So if somebody that's not familiar with the military, is that like a transport helicopter?
Yeah, so basically cargo, grunt transport. They they go in and pick up guys on the ground or drop them off, and then take off. And of course they've phased out the CH-46 from the Marine Corps, so it's no longer in existence. And we called that, if you ever hear somebody talk about the frog, that's what they call it, the frog.
Okay.
So it's basically like the little brother of the Chinook.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now let me ask you this: does it make you feel old that they phased it out now?
It is kind of funny to think, like, because when we came in, the A1 had been phased out for a little while. The CH-46 had taken that, but shortly after Vietnam, they had phased the A1 out, and some of those guys had the older, like, civilian guys we had working with us on the 46s. They would always talk about A1 this and and that type of stuff. And I was even around when the Huey and Cobra was just a 2-blade type thing. Now they got they got 4 blades, and they're getting it.
So let me ask you this: so you get done with everything, you go to North Carolina. You said you ended up getting deployed to Iraq.
Yeah, so I can't remember the year but anyways, we do what they call workups. So when we got there, after we graduated from our school, they gave us orders, and I went to then was VML or HML to, I can't remember the number on it, but anyways, they were the Raging Bulls, 261, I think it was, because all our guys had already kind of packed up and had taken off. And then, they came back, and we did another workup because, we were like just cycling through stuff. So we did another workup for 6 months, and then we left for Iraq. And that was kind of the initial push of Fallujah type frame. So we were kind of in the heat of all that stuff and doing that type of stuff back then.
Can you kind of talk about how was Iraq during that time frame?
So the first time I went, there was a lot of unease. There was a lot of everything. So I was on what I guess you could consider the second cycle. There was guys that had already went to Iraq the first cycle, and they saw a lot worse than kind of what we did even in that time frame. And those guys, it was spray or pray type thing. There was no, the Geneva Convention was there, but it's not like their orders were just like, basically, if they're after you, and then it was kind of that way for us. We spent some time on the ship, and then went into Iraq and did all that kind of stuff. And so it was a lot different. And then I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm trying to remember kind of my time frames, but went again, and it was completely chilled out. Like, some of the places that we had been previously, they had a green beans coffee, they had PX, that type of stuff. So they had infrastructure there, basically.
Yeah.
But at that time, I think that was 2005 was when I went then. They had the Mosul was really kicked off then, and that area. So we had already, the first trip, I think, is kind of when we were taking over Baghdad and doing all that stuff, and going into Baghdad and taking over the airports and doing that stuff. And then the next time I went was I went in Iraq, and then I went a ship trip, and then I went V-22s. I transitioned into, and then I went to Iraq with V-22s, and then a ship trip with V-22s. So seeing that, when you went back with the V-22s, which is the MV-22, which is the Osprey, it's the one that transitioned from a helicopter into an airplane.
Okay.
A lot of us guys, we had the option. Okay, do you want to stay CH-46 or do you want to transition to V-22s? Well, a lot of us said, hey, we just want to go to the new aircraft. We want to see what it's like. We want to go into that environment. And that's when the V-22 was kind of, it was still newer in the Marine Corps. I mean, and it was pretty frowned upon. We were still having a lot of issues with it and dealing with that part of it. But yeah, so as far as Iraq and seeing the changes and different things, it's kind of crazy to have seen that. And then when I was out as a civilian working for the Air Force guys, I talked to some of those guys, and it completely shut down some of the areas that we were in and everything. So, you get to see those transitions and deal with that kind of stuff when you're there. And it's kind of a weird thing that, we did a lot of training with Iraqis, but we also did a lot of detaining and stuff like that. So
after Iraq and everything like that, you said you went on the ship. Did you see anything while you're out on these ship deployments or anything, or?
Yeah, so kind of funny. So when I was still 46s, we had parked in Jordan, and this was the first time that a U.S. vessel had been in Jordan. And it's kind of fun. I don't want to get on the tangent of the government and how that works, but it's just funny seeing these kind of things because it makes you know that, what the government's really doing. So we got mortar attacked while we were sitting at port. And we had guys on the dock. Matter of fact, one of the Jordanian guys that we had dealt with, and he helped us load the ship with stuff and work and things. He was kind of their security guard. He actually got blown up by one of the mortars. And
Wow.
So most of the Navy guys for that trip got a combat action ribbon, which is kind of ironic if you think about it. But one of my really good friends, also Jose Molina, he was down on the dock, and I remember him talking after, because as soon as that happened, we left. I mean, we got off the dock. It's funny, we were down in the armory watching on the TV on CNN, and they were talking about our ship leaving. It's like, how did you guys even know or get that news that quick? But it was interesting of seeing that. And
Who was doing the attacking?
so it was just the malicious guy, terrorist guys that were in Jordan at that time.
So they were just trying to attack U.S. assets.
Yeah, they didn't care. They didn't care what or why. Just,
Yeah.
they were shooting mortars and hoping that it landed on something. So, and they got pretty a matter of fact, the USS Ashland was with us at that time, and I think that they got hit on their deck.
And see, that's why I asked you the other day, because I remember your sister was a couple years younger than I was, and I remember hearing that through her a little bit, the story, because she was worried about you, when that happened.
Yeah, so that one occurred, and when I went out, I was V-22s at this time. Man, I can't remember what LHD we were on at this time. But anyways, we were with the Ashland again. Oh, it was the Nassau that I was on. Some Somalian pirates. This is when the Somalian pirates were a big thing. You remember when they were like that? They tried to attack our ship, and it was the craziest thing because we were all upstairs working on aircraft on the deck and watching literally this little skiff thing. I mean, it's got like 5 dudes on it. I mean, they're hauling tail towards us, and the Navy guys are over the loudspeakers, like telling them in every different language that there is, like, hey, this is a U.S. vessel. If you don't exit, you will be destroyed, type thing. And the next thing I know, the 60 takes off. The Sea Whiz, they unload that thing, like they take the cover off of it. They got Marine snipers up on top, and they just start unloading on this thing. And of course, due to Geneva Convention, the 60 goes out, they rescue them and bring them back on the ship, and that we put them in the quarantine area, which was kind of our hangout area at that time, because we all were up on the top decks, kind of interfered with what we had going on. But they put them and one of them, it blew his leg off, and the other one I think blew his arm off or something like that. And it was kind of crazy. Yeah, they had to clear out the bottom deck of the ship, and where they kept, it was the brig where they kept them. And the guys that were in the brig, like the Navy sailors, the Marines that had gotten in trouble or whatever, I don't think we had too many at that time. We were pretty focused on getting some stuff done, and they put them down there and brought them back to America.
So you said one of them got their leg blown off? Like they had to, I mean, that's probably some pretty intense medical, treatment that they had to receive.
Yeah, they took them over to triage and took care of them and sewed them up and did all that stuff for them, and then took them down. Like I said, took them down to the brig. So as
Wow.
Americans, I mean, we took care of them. It's not. I know a lot of people think war this and and yeah, I mean war is just terrible. It's
Yep.
horrible. But we take care of the other side, and a lot of terrorists and a lot of those groups, they use that against us. They know that that's how we operate,
Yep.
so they use those kind of things against us.
How long did you do kind of down there in that theater?
So that was, I think we did most of my deployments were 6 to 9 month time frames, so we was we called them gator circles, kind of watching that area and doing that type of stuff. That was for a 6 month period of time.
And just for people that don't know, I mean, Somalia, that's where Black Hawk Down happened in the, early to mid 90s. There wasn't really a central government per se. And there was all these, groups that were fighting for power. And some of them hated the U.S. so bad that they were attacking U.S. ships.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong. I mean, they knew that's a death sentence pretty much when they're in a little skiff attacking an American ship, but they're probably trying to score some points, some political points out there on the mainland with, different people. Like, hey, we're going to go attack these Americans head on.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I've seen a lot of, I mean, when, and that's another thing that in the 90s, when we didn't have war going on, a lot of these guys would go out on what we call a booze cruise, and just go and do their 6 months on the ship. Then, I mean, we weren't doing none of that. Every trip that I went on, there was some kind of war, something going on in those theaters that we were at, and trying to protect. I mean, at that time, there was a lot of Jordan stuff going on in Yemen. I don't know if you remember the
Yep.
Yemen stuff was going on. And I can just remember that being just, a crazy situation because we were trying to take out one of the high profile people there in Yemen. And it took us 6 times to get him to a point of where, because these dudes, these guys, they would have meetings in these buildings and they'd bring the women and kids in there and they would have them around because they knew that Americans wouldn't attack in that situation. And then it's kind of funny because we finally caught him coming out and he was on a motorcycle and that was
Took out the threat.
Vacation home.
Well, and to think about that, Yemen's, I mean, just across, like, not very far from Somalia at all.
Yeah. So
like they're all right there.
Yeah, it was all kind of, in that part of life and that area. Those guys were all fighting for, like you said, they were all fighting for power. And
there we go. Yeah, you're back now. I can hear you.
Okay, all right, man. Sorry, my phone went off. Somebody was calling me. I don't know how to. I hope that didn't mess everything up. It probably did, I'm sure.